Here are some more important points on the recent bank failures. In recent videos, I have spoken of the role of the diversity, equity, and inclusion scam in bringing about the recent bank failures, and that should not be minimized. But it wasn't the only thing that contributed to the debacle. However, in this video, I'm going to try to give you a layman's perspective on how to manage a bank properly, and how the managers or mismanagers of the failed banks completely blew it. Imagine, if you will, the American banking system as a vast ocean. Like any ocean, the system is affected by currents and tides and gravity and such. In that same vein, imagine the waves on the shore as the ebb and flow of business cycles. There are booms and there are busts, and times of calm seas and times of great turbulence and agitation. Now, what are the, quote, currents and tides and gravity, end quote, that affect this vast ocean that is the American banking system? Well, there are things like interest rates, inflation, employment levels, industry ups and downs, wars, the stock market, the bond market, commodities, laws and regulations and such. Anything that exercises gravity or weight on Americans' participation in the banking system and how they choose to do so affects this ocean. The really big influences are, of course, inflation, interest rates, the stock market, and things like that. The things you and I hear about every day when we listen to or watch the news. If any one of these factors were to shift suddenly, that shift is like an earthquake on the ocean floor. Only it's an earthquake on the floor of our metaphorical ocean that we're using to understand the American banking system a bit better. The follow-up to such an earthquake in the real ocean is almost always a tsunami that sometimes swamps large areas of land, leaving death and destruction in its wake. We saw that in Japan and Thailand recently, when devastating tsunamis followed deep-sea earthquakes, causing horrible death and destruction. Back to our analogy. Have we seen anything lately that might cause financial tsunamis in American banking? Sure have. Big things. COVID caused unemployment because idiots in government enacted stupid policies that literally prevented people from working. Businesses closed, leading to massive unemployment. The government then began to print money as if they'd never stop, foreshadowing the very inflation that we're seeing at this very moment. And what does the Federal Reserve do when inflation rises? Easy. It raises interest rates. What happens when interest rates rise? That drags the stock market down. Unemployment, inflation, interest rates, the stock market. Four of the big gravitational influences on the ocean that is the American banking system. What would the smart bank manager do in response to, say, COVID? The first in the really big triggers of important financial events in recent years. Well, he or she would easily foresee that the massive government money printing and spending spree would result in inflation. Obviously. That's clue number one. Next, interest rates have been at historical lows for years now. That's clue number two. Next, things never stay as they are. That's clue number three, and it's a law. But the smart bank manager must respond both to conditions as they are today and to the conditions they foresee, and he or she must try to make money from current conditions and both make money and prevent losses from future conditions. The point is that the smart bank manager would have foreseen higher interest rates and inflation more than 3 years ago, all the way back in late 2019 and very early 2020, when COVID was panicking the entire world. The smart bank manager would have asked himself, how do I make money from increasing interest rates, increasing inflation, and higher unemployment? And he also would have asked himself, how do I minimize losses in these conditions? The mismanagers of Silicon Valley Bank invested in long-term strategies that depended on interest rates remaining at historic lows for those strategies to pay off. But there was a reason everyone was saying that interest rates were at historic lows. It was because that kind of thing had never been seen before, and the obvious implication is that one shouldn't expect things to remain that way. Duh. Or, to torture our ocean metaphor just a bit more, the Silicon Valley bank managers saw the things that would cause the earthquake. They heard people talking about the incoming financial tsunami, and those managers bought shorefront property and went out for a nice swim at the beach. This was yet another way in which the whole DEI scam contributed to the bank failures. After all, if the vice president of this or that is more concerned with making sure that the trans people in the community are okay and the POC aren't upset and there aren't any objectionable statues on the town square, and if that same vice president is not paying attention to the things that affect, bank stuff, well, that bank is going to be swamped by the tsunami. And it was. As were more banks. How many more? I don't know. All the ones who took their eyes off the ball and forgot an eternal truth about banking. The bank that helps the community the most is one that does really good banking. It's also the one that continues to improve its banking. And it's the bank that understands that it needs to avoid anything that doesn't directly contribute to its doing banking stuff all the better. It's the bank that doesn't try to pretend that it's not a bank, or worse, that it's more than a bank.